So the other day I was out thrifting and I came upon this gem and I knew I had to get it. When I was growing up, these were everywhere. And as a kid, I was always really interested in getting one because the way they were marketed and packaged made it seem like this would be a functional laptop. Then when you actually try the demo in the store, you're disappointed that it can only do two things. So my goal for this project is to fulfill that childhood wonder and make this laptop fully functional. Now, to make this interesting, I want to try to preserve as much of the laptop as possible. It smells like a new pool. While also using thrifted parts. First look into the smallest screen in the world. Never mind. There's only so much lefty-loosey I can do. All right, there you go. Yeah, it's like riveted on there. Look at that. It's not repair friendly, I'll tell you that much. It just fits perfectly there. So this is a Raspberry Pi 3. Got the Zag Folio wireless keyboard for an iPad mini. I thrifted it, it wasn't working, the battery was dead, so I switched it out. But that actually, oh my goodness. It's kind of crazy how well that fits in there. I think I will use some of these buttons. So it's gonna have a Bluetooth keyboard in there. That's gonna go there. This is the screen I'm gonna use. I actually thrifted this as well. It is an entertainment system in the back of your car, like on the headrest, but it accepts AV inputs. It came with this whole jumble of wires, which I'm not going to cram into there. So I'm gonna map out these proprietary cables here for power, audio, and visual, and then we're going to connect it directly to the Raspberry Pi. Funny enough, what I thought would be the simplest part of this project actually turned out to be the most difficult. But more on that later. All right, so proof of concept. It's all gonna fit in here nice and easy, even with the full body of this display. I could cut it down, but I'm worried about the ribbon cables. I don't wanna break anything. So for this round, I'm just gonna do it this way. So what I need to do is punch out some holes for this I/O in the back. You would have never known anything weird happened here. Perfect, look at that. I now have microplastics running through my veins. The next thing that I needed to do was design and print the brackets that are gonna hold the keyboard and the display. And this project is the perfect excuse for me to start learning Fusion 360. Because believe it or not, up until now, I've just been using Tinkercad, which if you're familiar, only really allows you to use basic shapes. Okay, so this turned out really well. First time I modeled on Fusion 360, so I'm pretty happy with it. But let's see if this works. Okay, well, it fits. I think I underestimated the width at the top here. As you can see, it's a little squished. But the true question is if this will fit. And not only will it fit, but is it lined up? And I'm guessing the answer is no. This is terrible. Let's say I remove this wall here. So what I ended up doing was tweaking the first draft that I printed until I figured out the design that would really work. Despite my first draft being a complete failure, I'm actually pretty proud of this one because it incorporates two compliant mechanisms at the top, which not only secure the keyboard, but also gave me the privilege of not being too precise. All right, so this is done. It fits perfectly and it doesn't fall out, which is my main concern. The next thing I need to do is create a plate that'll go in front of this on the bezels and hold it in place. I think the coolest part about using these CAD softwares is the ability to take a picture and then model your design off of that picture. This has been a complete game changer for me, and I knew about it for a long time, but I think I've always been a little intimidated by these more advanced CAD softwares. But what I'm trying to do with myself and this channel is push myself more outside of my comfort zone for every project. And what's funny is now that I'm using Fusion, I have no idea why I didn't start sooner. The cool thing about the Raspberry Pi 3B is it has composite video out. So the fact that it has composite and HDMI means I can plug the Raspberry Pi straight into the screen that I wanted to use. And here's where it started to get a little annoying. Due to different standards of cables, not all of them have the same wiring. So my assumption here was that the cable I had was incorrect, and I tried to fix that by soldering my own. And when I did, I tried it on a bunch of different screens to no avail. What I was yet to realize was this problem actually had more to do with the boot configuration of the Raspberry Pi. I decided to shift focus to the keyboard. I disassembled it and removed the existing button that would enable pairing mode and soldered a button I took from the laptop in its place. After putting it back together, I cut out a slot for USB power to the keyboard, and by that time the screen bracket was actually done printing. Moment of truth. Yes. This was actually really tricky to get right because the lid of the laptop is actually an irregular shape, but thankfully it worked out. Now, before figuring out how to get the Raspberry Pi to output composite video, I had to map out all the terminals on this so that I could make a much smaller cable. After that, I got some color-coded wires and did a physical connection on each. I gave it a quick test before soldering, and it worked perfectly. The first thing I did was solder extensions onto each of the cables. The next thing I did was solder a power supply connector to the positive and negative terminals. So up until this point, I'm still unable to get the composite video to work. So I'm having to cram this HDMI cable and HDMI to AV converter all in this case. I was doing this to test fit and see what needed to go. And I definitely needed to cut out these extra supports within the hinge compartment because that's where the cables are going to be passing through. Okay, so I have all the functionality that I need in here. We're gonna try plugging in the monitor and making sure that works. Perfect. All right, so now I just need to take it apart, finish up the wiring for the RC cables, and then we can put it back together and finish it off. What I forgot to mention, however, is naturally the portable charger has to be accessible from outside the laptop. So the only logical explanation was to have access through the battery hatch. Another thing that I needed to do was cut down as much as I can from these chunky AV cables. I wanted to make sure I had enough space for not only the cables, but also the power terminal within that hinge. So I actually forgot to connect the audio to the ground when I was soldering it up. It was easy enough to fix. I removed the insulation with the lighter and soldered it back. I then soldered the cable that I created to some female AV cables. Soldering is actually another thing that I've been meaning to get better at. I had a little bit of trouble in the beginning of this project, and I think that's because I'm using lead-free solder and I don't have flux. But I found that using a fine sandpaper on the cables before soldering actually helps tremendously. If you have any tips or think I did something wrong, let me know down in the comments. So the cool thing about this portable charger is if you double click it, it actually turns off. This means two things. I can ensure that no power is drawn from the portable charger when it's not in use, but I also need a way to access the button. So instead of ruining this portable charger, I decided to cut a hole in the laptop. At this point, we're 90% the way there, so I'm designing some final touches. All right, so I bought some stuff because I not only wanted to improve this one, but I also wanted to use it for a future project. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. As I mentioned earlier in this video, the screen actually runs off of 12 volts. So I found this really affordable 12-volt battery on Amazon. It came with this cool connector and a charger. I was in such a rush that I forgot to record installing these two accent panels. One allows you to turn on the battery for the display, and the other one is just a wrist rest, but you can open it to access any of the components inside. After hours of troubleshooting, I finally figured out a specific set of commands that you need to run to get composite video out. So I was finally able to use the AV cables, and this was the result. So it's done, and I had so much fun working on this project, and I learned quite a lot about using Fusion 360 and creating models that interface with the real world, because up until now, most of my designs only interface with themselves. And this is definitely the most complex thing that I've worked on to this day. Of course, this isn't actually that practical, but it did fulfill that childhood wonder. Now, this project also gave me a great idea for one of my next videos, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.